And P.S. I decided to wear red lipstick today because I've been wearing no makeup on YouTube. And I feel like if I put red lipstick on, everything's okay. So you can have your worst day and feel like you look like poo. But if you have red lipstick on, it can make your whole day, ladies. And maybe gentlemen that are listening, whoever wants to wear red lipstick, wear it.
We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meagan with Meagan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meagan.
Hi, everyone. You are listening to Judging Meagan with your host, Meagan Judge. Okay, just a few housekeeping notes, which I like to now do. I love saying housekeeping. It makes me sound like I'm like in a business meeting. I'm in a really good mood today. And I realized this morning when I woke up, I'm usually like yelling to get the kids out of the house. And you know what it is? And I'm going to tell my guests this. I figured out that this morning I was in a good mood because I was listening to Lizzo. So I feel like every morning now I'm going to start listening to Lizzo because it just made me really happy. I found myself not yelling at my kids to get out of the house. I usually start my day with really depressing news. And today I started my morning with Lizzo and music. So I think I'm going to try and do that. Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing is, please do not forget to leave me a review on Apple or wherever you listen. I am begging of you. It helps me. I haven't been asking lately, and it does help my new listeners find me. And it helps me with on Apple. So I would really appreciate that if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, Amazon, wherever you're streaming, or my website, judgingmeagan.com. Small plug. Also, I have added, or Matt, because I'm pretending like I'm technical. I'm not. Matt, my amazing website guy, added a buy me an oat milk latte button. So I am a podcaster that if you want to throw me $1 and you listen to my podcast every week, I would love that because it's a lot of work to have content every week. I love it. I love meeting new people. I can't wait to talk to my guests today. Lastly, I'm still begging of you to subscribe to my podcast on YouTube because I know you're listening and maybe you're thinking, I don't want to go listen again on YouTube. You don't have to. You can just go to YouTube and subscribe. I'm going to start putting additional content on YouTube. Okay, this is my story. So my daughter, and I'm going to sound like an obnoxious stage mom, okay, which is not what I ever want to be in my life, but my daughter has followed my footsteps and she loves musical theater and she loves acting. This is my 8-year-old. And so they had an audition for the show Annie. And in my head, I was like, okay, all summer, Mom, I have to be Annie. She watches Annie. Annie was the reason as a child I wanted to become an actress. And I was a theater major in college and did all the stage I did my whole life. So my dad, when I was a little girl, before he passed away, he would every day bring home these trading cards for my brother. They were baseball cards. And because my dad was like a total jock and we had nothing in common whatsoever, he really tried with me. And I was always singing like show tunes and like leaping through the house after dance. And so he would bring me home these Annie trading cards. I was obsessed with Annie. I watched it. I saw it on the Kennedy Center in DC like a million times with my mom. I loved it. I sang The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow at every event, even like when Father Gatto, my priest at Our Lady of Mercy, retired, I sang it. I sang The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow at my grandmother's funeral. I sang it everywhere. Everyone would ask me to sing it as a kid. So when Ella tried out for Annie and they sent out the casting, and I saw that she got Annie, I couldn't help but start hysterically crying because it really reminded me of like how I'm going to get emotional, but like that my dad isn't here and I wish he knew her and he saw her, but also I'm so embarrassed. I was hysterically crying because I was so happy. It was like a full circle moment of knowing that even though he's not on this planet and he's not on Earth, he's with me and he's with us. And so I know that's like such a stage mom thing to say, but I was really happy and I started crying. And Ella was like, Mom, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Like, I was more excited
You're
for her to
making
get
me
Annie
cry.
than she was. Yeah. Anyways, that's my story for the week. I'm already crying in the beginning of the episode. I would like to introduce you all to Meagan O'Nan. Meagan spells her name the wrong way. I'm just going to tell you that, Meagan. It's Meagan O'Nan. She is, wait till you hear her resume. It is not impressive at all. I have to put my glasses on to say this. She is an award-winning author and speaker. And her award-winning book, Creating Your Heaven on Earth and Courage, Agreeing to Disagree is Not Enough, are available. Where are they available, Meagan? Can people get them on your website?
Everywhere.
And you have a new book coming out in January called Held and Free, correct?
That's right. I do. Yeah, it'll be out in January.
I mean, that's really, really not impressive at all. I would love to pick your brain on how you became an award-winning. And also you've spoken and gotten praise from Desmond Tutu. So not a big deal at all.
Humbling for sure.
Meagan, it's such an honor to meet you and have you on. I, again, am sorry that you spell your name the wrong way, but I think that we have in common the Irish piece, correct?
Yeah, you said you were a recovering Catholic, and I was like, yeah, me too.
I'm not a recovering Catholic. I'm a Reformed Catholic, which means
Reformed Catholic,
I am
sorry.
very spiritual. Reformed. I'm very spiritual. I go to mass. I live for my priest at my church. He's my everything. And
Awesome.
but when I say Reformed, I mean I would like the Catholic Church to be up to speed. I believe in gay marriage. I believe in most young Catholics believe in the things that I think we both can agree that it's time women should be priests. There's lots of changes that need to go into the faith, but I will tell you this before we start talking about you. I did, and I have talked about this on the podcast. I did kind of go through periods in my life where I left the church due to like, well, why is this happening with priests? But I've always had myself had such a good experience with my faith and leaned so heavily on my faith, even in my darkest times when I walked away from my faith. And honestly, like I credit my priest that I adore as helping save my life. So for me, it's my rock. And I think reading your bio, faith is really extraordinarily important to you as well.
Yeah, it is. And I will say that, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but as a gay woman in growing up in the Catholic Church, I actually found a lot of support there, here in Mississippi even. And that church the community of that church has been very supportive to my family, the priest included. And they have been very helpful and willing to have conversations and communicate. And so I have found that community to be behind me and my family through definitely our toughest times.
Well, I love that. And we're going to kind of dive into that. But I think it is so important to acknowledge, because I think that there's a lot of Catholics out there that believe in equality and it's time to change. And I know, like, even in my own church, there is an LGBTQ plus group So I believe it's moving in the right direction. That's what I'll say. So let's
sure.
start with you, where you grew up, and kind of get your backstory, Meagan.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Starkville, Mississippi, which is where Mississippi State University is. And like I just said, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I was kind of that kid that always questioned everything about how Mass went or how life went. I was very curious. I didn't understand why women couldn't be in leadership. I didn't understand why I had to ask God for a priest for forgiveness when I had this relationship, this personal relationship with God, whom I felt like I could communicate with on my own. Why did I need to go through a person for that? So I was just naturally curious spiritually, and I'd often really confuse my parents with my questions, but they kind of rolled with it and supported me there. And they didn't really have answers for me. So it really led me to being a very quiet and private person and finding my spirituality in my writing and in my journals and in my diaries, and became very close to God in that way for myself, because I didn't feel like I was being fully fed spiritually. I felt like there was more for me, and I wanted to learn more and I wanted to understand more, but I didn't have a lot of places here in Mississippi where I could go and learn different ways of thinking and seeing the world. And I was just very hungry to learn spiritually. So I was that kind of kid, this deep thinker, always, just really looking at life and studying it and being very curious about what it was, what it all entailed. It was just a big mystery, and it's still a big mystery, but it's something that I'm very curious about. So growing up was just a very traditional family. My parents were high school sweethearts. They're still married to this day. They still are very much in love with each other, and they're adorable and cute. And I have two brothers, and I went to college at Mississippi State. I played athletics at Mississippi State, basketball and softball. And when it came to my senior year, I started really seeing who I was. And I dated my first girl and hid it for a long time. I don't know how I did that, but I did. And there was just so much shame around it that I was really just terrified of even coming out. And once I did finally come out, my fear was matched. And so I was a part of a Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which was a Christian fellowship for athletes at the university, and was basically excommunicated from the organization and had a really tumultuous time with them. And then with my family, it was hard because this was new for them. It was new for me. It was uncharted waters. We didn't have anyone in our family that we could relate to. And so it was just a really hard time for everybody. And it led me to leave Mississippi. My older brother, actually, after I came out, my mom brought the whole family over. And my older brother, he was like, you should probably leave Mississippi. It'll be safer for you somewhere else. And so I really took that to heart. And I was like, it probably would be. I need to get out of here. I felt like I had disappointed everyone. I felt like I had let everyone down. And I needed to find myself outside of the pressure of the culture, of society, and of just everything that I had been through, and find a way through and find some kind of worthiness within. So I left for a long time. I ended up in Florida and Colorado. And in 2008, when my first book was published, I met my now wife. So we've been together 14 years and married for 8. We started our relationship. I kind of started my career. I quit my last 8-to-5 job and started my entrepreneurial journey as a writer and speaker, because that's what I always wanted to do. And we ended up coming to Mississippi in 2010. And
so you came back to Mississippi.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop you and bring up 2 points that you brought up.
Okay.
I love what you said about that your spirituality was about you and God, not like the middleman of like the additional layer.
Right.
And I think that that's so important for people to understand, that if you my listeners have all different kinds of beliefs, right? For me, there's a God. For you, there's a God. But I was like that too. As a little girl, I think I came out just knowing like I was so spiritual, I was fascinated by heaven. I don't know if it was because I had the trauma of losing my sister so young that I had to know like about God, and I had to understand, like, am I going to see God again, or am I going to see God one day? And is my sister with God? So I spent a lot of my childhood just trying to be like, like doing all the right things and following all the rules until a certain point. And I can talk about that later. But I love that you said that, because I think it's so important, because your spirituality is really about you and God. That's what it's about as a human being on this earth. There, going to church, going to mass, I mentioned my priest, all the other layers are important too. But I love that you said that. And then the second thing I want to say is, I at one point sang on this cruise ship when I was a teenager, and it was my best summer ever. So I was singing like all show tunes on a cruise ship, and it was just me and a bunch of like, guys, and they were all like dancers and singers, and I just had so much fun. And I remember, I'll never forget this. One of them told me this story about how he grew up in the South, and he was in a fraternity. And he said, I had to lie about who I was. I could never come out. I could never really be who I was. And I was so shamed by it, by my parents, when I finally did, that I legitimately was going to take my own life. And, and so I think that's why it's so important to me to spread the stories of people. Like, it breaks my heart that you were just in college playing sports, trying to be like a 19-year-old kid or however old you were, and dating somebody because that's who you are. You're not attracted to men. You're attracted to women. There's nothing wrong with that. That's God put you on this earth as the person that you are. I happen to be attracted to a man, but if I was attracted to a woman, so I'm going to be kicked out of my town and chastised. That's not what Christianity and religion's about, period. So I needed to stop you and point that out, because every time I hear a story like that, and I think every single, most of my best friends are gay. Every single one of my friends or guests that I've had on has told the story of coming out, and very few of them were told their stories with open arms, in acceptance. Yeah. And I think it would probably be even harder in the South. So I'll shut my mouth and let you speak.
No, thank you for all of that. I agree with you. That you pointed out having that your own relationship with God, whatever that looked like. This morning I was feeling very disconnected. And the simple act of putting on some music that I really liked, you talked about that too, and journaling and getting connected again to that part of me is what just changed my whole day. And it lifted me up, and I realized you can't always run on empty. You can't always run on, fumes. We're so inundated with so much information all the time with technology and the world and everything that's going on, that having those pause moments to just refuel, that's the God that's important to me. And I have a 3.5-year-old, and she says it very simply. She's like, God is in my heart. And if I follow her lead and I connect to my heart, then that's where my God is. And so for me, that's essentially where I am in my journey spiritually, is just really connecting back to that part of me, that bigger part of me that's inside of me, that's inside of all of us, and remembering that it's all connected. So I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's nice for me to reflect on too. And
were you listening to Lizzo as well? Were we both listening to Lizzo?
No, I was not. I so wish I would have been, though.
Can you
been awesome.
imagine? Can you imagine if you were like, and then this morning I was journaling and I was also listening to It's About Damn Time in a Minute. I love that song. I listen to it all the time. Anyways,
Sometimes I do.
I had to just say
Sometimes
it.
I just go
I
get
had
a
to say
workout on with that music. Yeah.
Judging Meagan with Meagan Judge.
Now, a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. So, it can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with challenges in life. Something that I found is, in my own experience, I was in therapy for a long time, loved my therapist. She's taking a break so she can write a book. So I decided to fill out the survey myself on BetterHelp. And I will tell you right now, I was matched up with the best therapist. I didn't think it was possible. I used my own discount and I did it. So I just want you to know that this is not just an ad. I'm actually a real BetterHelp client. I love it. I love the therapist they matched me up with. And I can just tell you it was super convenient. It's a great option. It's accessible, it's affordable, and it's entirely online. So what you do is you type in betterhelp.com/judgingmegan today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/judgingmegan. And now back to the show.
Judging Meagan with Meagan Judge.
Yeah.
So going back to what you were saying.
Right. So coming back to Mississippi, and facing my trauma has often seemed very crazy to other people, but it was like this stage in my life where things are going well and I was happy. But there was still this part of me that just felt very, I don't know, just unhealed. And there was so much personal work for me to do. And I knew that I didn't have confidence in being an LGBTQ person. And that was very clear to me that when I would come home to Mississippi and visit my family, like I still wanted to hide. I still had all of that shame. And I didn't want to be out in public and face my hometown. So I knew that at some point, if I were going to face the darker parts of me that I didn't love, that I had to come back. And so I didn't want to come back, but I knew I had to come back. It was one of those things. It was like, I remember standing in my friend's kitchen in Colorado and looking out the window and just like seeing this vision of Mississippi and this calling back to come back here. And I knew it was for me. I knew I didn't want to do it, but I was like, I have to if I want to heal. And so, and Claire, my wife, she had never, ever been to the South. And she was like, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I was like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Tell me what it was like for once you got back. And it does make sense to me. Like it does make sense because I say this all the time. We're here on this earth for such a short period of time. And in my opinion, we go through a series of tests. And it's like, well, this happened and then this happened. And there's a reason, like they say, everything happens for a reason, which can be irritating to people. But to me, I really do believe that. And I do believe that there's a reason why you were called back to Mississippi. And
For sure.
I do want to get into the piece of something that you talk about a lot is forgiveness and how important forgiveness is. And that piece of you that was called you back to Mississippi. Tell me about that. Tell me about like what it was like once you got back, how your heart was, and were you able to like work on the forgiveness like down the line with like family or whoever had hurt you? Tell me about that piece of it.
Well, I would say, being here 12 years now, since 2010, it's been a journey and it's been like baby step after baby step after baby step. But when I first got back here, I remember feeling just like scared to death, so afraid to be myself, so unsure. And I remember when we first rented the first house that we picked when we moved to Mississippi, I did not tell the landlord that that another woman was going to be moving in with me. I made him believe that it was just me because I was so scared of him finding out and then wanting to kick us out. That's how scared I was to be myself. And so that's where it all started, was that.
It sounds to me like that is such an archaic thing. Like, just because I have always lived in like, cities, I can't even relate to that. Although I do have a lot of family in Charleston, South Carolina, and that's my happy place. But yeah, I mean, just being like having to like hide and be afraid. I can't even imagine what that was like.
Well, it's possible that, if I had told him, he would have been like, oh, that's great, whatever, but I didn't give him that opportunity. And so as time went on, I realized, okay, if I want to be myself, I have to give people an opportunity to see me and love me for who I am. And if I'm not being authentic and I'm not being, somewhat vulnerable and putting myself out there, then, how am I ever going to connect with myself fully or other people fully? And so as time went on, I started to do that. And I actually, in just a few years, I started my own blog called Everyone's Gay. And it became a very popular thing in the area where people were wanting to have discussions with me over Facebook Messenger, emails, phone calls. And then before I know it, I'm on the radio and I'm on TV, and, the city is pushing for equality measures and everybody wants me to come speak to city council. And so, or Mississippi State calls me for National Coming Out Day, and I tell my story on stage. It goes on the front page of the newspaper, and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes calls me to apologize. Like, there is just story after story after story of me just trying to embed myself and my story into the culture here, and where people have met me there and wanted to learn and come together and find a way to communicate and have hard conversations. And I'm not saying that it's been smooth and easy. It's been very rocky. I've got plenty of stories too where the opposite is true, where, my wife and I were working a contract with someone and they fired us because they found out we were gay. So, there's, it's being business owners and being an openly gay family. It's had its many, many challenges of us really stepping up to be ourselves and put ourselves out there, even when it's been really scary most of the time. But over the course of time, things have gotten so much easier. And I would say now, where we are now, it's, I don't think about it very often. Sometimes my daughter's in preschool and I get a little bit, trepidatious about like other parents finding out that Merritt has two moms, but people always surprise me, and things are very different now and things have really moved forward. But I think for the forgiveness piece, the hardest thing for me has been self-forgiveness and forgiving myself for not loving myself enough to be authentic in those moments that I wanted to be myself, but I was too scared to be. So it's been a lot of self-healing too, of hiding myself and not putting myself forward and being my true self in front of other people or whatever it may be. That's been a big one, a big forgiveness part of my journey. And the other part of it has been, really healing those relationships that are meaningful for me and having those hard conversations and having forgiveness around my trauma and my experiences. So it's kind of twofold.
Let me ask you, the amount of trauma, I was having a chat yesterday with one of my very best friends. His name is Josh. He's been on the podcast numerous times. And we were talking about our trauma, which we have deep conversations about constantly. Most of my friends, I'm a very deep person, if you can't tell. And I like to talk about, I like to small talk and talk about dumb things and Real Housewives and all those things. Also, I adore talking about. But he and I were kind of he was telling me, I'm kind of having a hard day and I'm just feeling blue. And I was like, well, I've been feeling blue lately too. And I don't know why. I think it's just there's been a lot of stuff going on in my own life, where there's been people going to funerals or hearing somebody sick. A lot of that stuff has been happening. And he told me this story, and he was like, I think what it is I realize like this time of year, for some reason, all of my trauma comes up, and my childhood trauma of like being bullied as a kid because I was different and I was gay and people didn't understand me because I was very, like I was different than everyone else where I grew up, and they made fun of me. And he's like, and like my parents didn't really understand me. And then to like shift to now, it makes me sad that you said that it's like people want to test the waters again and trust and be like, well, this is me. I'm a gay person, but you're afraid to tell people because it's like you were so traumatized by who you were and sharing, like putting out your cards as a teenager, which is still a kid, that it like still traumatizes you to this day. And it's like, well, taking your kid to preschool, that shouldn't even be something that you even should like think twice about. Like, you have 2 gay parents. That's awesome. They're just like everyone else's parents. They just happen to be the same sex. But I had to point that out because it makes me, it's such a common conversation and thread that I have with my friends that, were, straight and gay, might have been bullied or might have had trauma as a child, that it's like, they're afraid. Like for me personally, I was in like a really bad friend breakup a couple years ago. And now I'm in a totally different place. And I have these, I always have my friends from growing up and people I can trust, but I have a whole new group of friends. And sometimes I'm afraid to tell them things, or there's like trust issues because I had been so burnt by my old friends that it's like, and like I had one of my friends tell me the other day, she's like, well, Meagan, I love you. It doesn't matter if like you say that. I'm not going to not be your friend anymore over something so stupid. Like it makes sense that all of these things as human beings make us and to feel the way that we feel because we don't feel wanted. And it's all stems from trauma.
Totally. And and as human beings too, we yearn for connection, and we yearn for deep connection, and we yearn for trust. So there's this constant battle, and we all experience it. It doesn't matter if we're gay or straight or religious or not religious or whatever it may be. We all have trauma and we all have trust issues, So for me, it's like, okay, do I want to sit in that lack of trust forever, or do I want to try again? And at the end of the day, I always want to try again because to me, it's worth it. And like you said earlier, we're only here for a short amount of time. And I feel like we're here to experience love, and we're here to experience connection on new levels. And that's, really it. And so for me, that's what pushes me to dig a little bit deeper when it's really scary. And it's also the thing that gets me to a place with other people where I can actually have a deeper connection because it was something that we both wanted. But, there's going to be seasons of friendships. There's going to be seasons of relationships, and people are going to come and go our entire lives. And that's okay. They don't all have to stay. It's just a part of the nature of being a human being, I suppose.
I love that you say that everything has its seasons, and it is true. Like some friends or people stay in our life for a short period, and there's a lesson to be had by every single person that comes into your life. Yeah. Even if it's like at a Starbucks, you know?
Yeah.
And you have an interaction and it's like negative. Like I was telling you before we recorded, I have an Irish temper. It's one of my I'm heavily flawed, but it's one of my biggest flaws is my Irish temper. And nothing drives me more crazy. And I talked about this in my last episode when it was like 550 degrees here and I was just like really hot. And I came into the podcast like in a bad mood, and some lady was rude to me at my kid's school. And, but I hate it when like you hold the door open for somebody and they don't say thank you. It drives me insane. Like it's like nails on a chalkboard to me.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I hold the door open for somebody and they don't say thank you, I go, "You're welcome," because it really drives me insane. So my point is that brief relationship with the rude person in Starbucks, that happened for a reason. I still don't really know why, but I've had a lot of those kinds of stories. But it is true. Everything has its seasons. Our relationships, some will last a lifetime if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Marriages, like are not easy. My husband and I have been together 20 plus years. We met young. We literally want to wring each other's neck at least 3 times a week. And then add in the kid, which you understand, and it's even more. I want to ask you, because I know that you talk a lot about this. How did you get, let's talk about forgiveness, because this is important to me selfishly. I am one of the things that I am trying desperately to get to in my own personal life is not being so angry and to be able to forgive. And I had a guest come on, I think a last month, and her story's awful. Her husband had been murdered, and he was brutally murdered. And she had to identify the body, and he was cheating on her with a prostitute. It was a whole thing. And she told me the story, and I said, "Well, how did you forgive? How did you forgive him? He was gone and he left her with all this debt, and it was just awful." And she said, "Well, I don't forgive. I've turned that side where everybody says, well, you have to forgive. That's part of being a Christian. You have to forgive." She said, "Instead, I went to third world countries and I volunteered. And that's my way of, I'll never forgive him. But I would love to hear your opinion on forgiveness, because for me, I cannot seem to get over some really hard things that I went through and be able to forgive. And I wish I could. So I would love you to talk about that."
I think it depends on your definition of forgiveness. I mean, I think we never really forget the trauma and the hard things that we've been through that have hurt us. And if you wanted to dive into a memory or an experience or a conflict or a challenge that was hurtful, I think we can always jump back into that pretty easily and feel all of the emotions, no matter how much work we've done. I mean, I can go back to the day I came out and sit in that story. I've been writing my memoir. This next book is my memoirs, and writing all these stories out. It's really put me back in those, and it's been really hard. And so I think that forgiveness, I like what you just told me about the other woman, because I think forgiveness is just an everyday choice. And I think it's, for me anyway, it's been okay, I want inner freedom. I want to feel wholeness. I want to feel fullness in my life. What do I need to do to have that? And in some days, I'm mad and I take it out on other people. I take it out on my wife, or I take it out on my daughter, or whatever, but I never feel good about that in the end. And then I have to go and resolve it and, take care of it in my own way, as far as talking to them and all of that. But it's always good feedback for me that there's something going on, or I'm not taking care of myself, or whatever it is, or I'm feeling a lack of connection to God. So for me, I think it's just an everyday journey. It's an everyday choice, and bringing our full, authentic selves to everything that we do helps ease the burden of the past, I guess. So I don't know. I also think that over the years, I've been willing to have the hard conversations with the people who I want to continue to have a relationship with. And they've met me there, and I feel very fortunate for that. But, when it comes down to relationships and hard things, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is do I want to have a relationship with that person? They hurt me, but do I still want to continue that? And am I willing to do what it's going to take? Am I willing to say what I have to say in order to heal that relationship? And then the other side of that is, do you not want to have a relationship with that person? How do you forgive a person that you know you don't want to move forward with? And I think a big aspect of that too is saying your piece, whether it's to them or to a counselor or to whoever, is being able to get off your heart how you actually feel, like your real feelings about that situation, and actually say them. Until we can acknowledge the truth, I don't feel like we can ever really be set free. I know that's cliche, but that's what I have found for me, is just pouring myself out, and what I truly feel is the only thing that has gotten me to some sense of inner freedom.
I think for me, I think that's the stumbling block, and I'm glad you pointed that out. I think I don't forgive because I was so hurt, and I have no interest whatsoever in having a relationship with the people that hurt me so badly. Not even an ounce. So, and you can hear my anger as I say that, because that's how tremendously they hurt me.
Yeah.
But it is something that I know hurts me, is this anger. And it also comes from a deeper place of trauma from my childhood, and just like the PTSD that I have from what I went through. Tell me about your your parents. Are you in a good place with your family? Yeah. Is that like what you were talking about, like finding forgiveness? And I would love to know that.
Well, one of the things that, my mom and I have always had we've always been very connected, and I've always had a very special relationship. And so when I came out, her response was to cry uncontrollably and try to understand. But her response to me was one of fear, and I didn't feel like I was being fully supported. She didn't say, I don't support you, I don't love you. She said she loved me and that she wanted to support me, but the emotional disconnect was very painful for me. And so years later, we were still kind of going through this like cycle of discussion about being gay, and, her trying to accept it and all of that. It's just a really hard thing for her. I was like, okay, Mom, we need to revisit my coming out day together. And I need to tell you about my experience. I need you to tell me about your real experience. So we wrote letters to each other. And I was just honest about how her response made me feel. And she was honest about her feelings when I told her that I was gay. And we were just brutally honest in our letters. And so we got to see each other's experiences that were real in that moment. And then we gave ourselves a few days to read and kind of like process. And then we came back and had a conversation about what we had discovered about each other through the letters. And I think since then, we were able to move on in a brand new way. We still have, we just have normal relationship issues that any mother-daughter have now, but we're so brutally honest with each other that it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, because we've established this foundation of like, hey, I know you love me. I know she knows I love her. We know we don't want to hurt each other ever. And there's some level of trust there that now it's like, okay, I know I can say anything and it's going to be okay. And so we've established that. And I think really facing the trauma head on is the one thing that got us through kind of like that fogginess of uncertainty with each other. And so that was a super helpful thing that we did for us.
I don't know if you saw that I was crying. I think that's the most beautiful thing, to write a letter, because letters are so special, right? I mean, like writing a letter to another person. I did a spiritual retreat. I've done a few of them, but I did one years ago, and I got letters from my mom and like my sisters, and my older sister like wrote me something that she had never said to me. And it was just like a story about something that like happened when we were kids, and like just the visual, like just the right brain part. I'm heavily right brain. I don't even think my left brain works. That's a joke. It was like, I'm so touched by the visualization of writing and like reading something. So I think letters and like for a family, I think that's such a beautiful thing, you know, for a kid, especially. Any parent wouldn't wish their child to be gay. I mean, they just wouldn't. It's such a hard life. And it's to this day, even hard. I mean, with what the government's trying to do now, don't get me started. I don't get political on the podcast, but it is a scary time with like laws being, you know, trying to overturn laws and all the things that are happening and taking us like 50 years backwards instead of forwards, which is where I think half the population wants to go. And then there's like I like to think that people are good for the most part.
Yeah.
So there's a really small population that wants to go backwards, but you know, it's a scary time. And then for a parent to be told, you know, part of it as a parent is, you know, you're a mom, I'm a mom.
Yeah.
If one of my kids came to me, and which this, you know, could happen, and said, oh, like I'm gay. Well, being the parent, you would immediately go, well, what's the right thing to say? Right. And then you would say in your head, you would think, well, it's so hard. And I wonder if your mom just knew it wasn't out of love, but it was like the reaction that so many parents do have when their child tells them that they're gay, because they know what a hard life they're looking at.
Yeah.
And it's not the love. So I think the idea of sitting down and writing a letter and saying, this is who I am, I don't know. I think that's just such a beautiful thing that like literally is so touching to me and made me ugly cry for a second, but I'm okay.
Well, I put the letters in my book, actually. So they're there in their raw form. And it's also a helpful tool when you don't have that letter to exchange to the other person, because you know you don't want the relationship, or you know you don't want to move forward, because it's therapeutic. It allows you to write out your feelings and the experience and everything you've been through, and then you can go burn it in a fire or do whatever you want to do with it. But it's a very therapeutic way to deal with things, because until you acknowledge the experience for what it was and how you felt in that moment and all of the feelings and emotions that came with it, like how can you move forward until those have been acknowledged and validated?
Oh, I love that. Can you tell me, like, as we kind of wrap up, I want to hear about your books. So your best-selling award-winning book, Creating Your Heaven on Earth. Can you just briefly describe what that's about?
Sure. It was a book that I wrote when I was in a bad relationship, which is hilarious. But I was trying to write my way to what I knew was true for me, which was like, I should be living the life I want to live. And I deeply believed in happiness and joyfulness and fullness and wholeness. And so the book is really about like what my spiritual beliefs are. And it's got little stories and essays throughout. It's a short read. It's a simple read. It's an easy read. And I wrote my way out of that relationship. Thank goodness. And so the next book, Courage, Agreeing to Disagree is Not Enough. I wrote that in 2014 when we had been in Mississippi for 4 years and I had all these experiences. We were on the verge of marriage equality in 2015. And, you know, hearing time after time after time, Meagan, I love you, but I don't agree with your lifestyle. Or Meagan, I love you, but I don't agree with you getting married. It's okay that you and Claire live together, but don't get married. So I just really got sick of hearing that. And I was like, okay, how can we bridge the gap and like have these conversations? Like, we need to get beyond agreeing to disagree. And so the book is about some of those stories, some of those conversations I had, and just my beliefs around finding a bridge between our differences. Because when I came out, I felt like, here I am, this person, and I have this life and all these people in my life. And now I'm a label. Like, I'm not Meagan anymore. I'm just gay. Like, there's no more me in there. And so getting beyond our labels is something I've been very passionate about in my work. And so that was that one. And then this one, Held and Free, is coming. I'm writing this from, I think, a very healed place, from where I've come from. And so it's a memoir. It's all of my stories. It's my journey. It's the in-depth spiritual journey that I've taken and how I've dealt with everything. And it's a book of storytelling. My professional work is all about storytelling, and I teach storytelling to professional speakers, and I'm a speaker myself. And so it's about the power of storytelling and how it shifts things and changes things for all of us in our healing journeys. So I'm really excited about it, but I'm also very nervous about it because I'm really throwing it all out there on the table.
I can't wait. I want to read that. I love reading stories. I might reach out to you for help. You're like, Meagan, I just wanted to do one podcast. Leave me alone, please. I am the biggest procrastinator on the planet. Like, I am so unorganized. I really love speaking and talking to people. And I really want to write my book that I've been saying I'm going to write for 2 years. But my problem is I can't sit down to do it because I know the story, but I don't know how to start. And then, it's a scary thing. It's one thing to tell your story, which I do every week on the podcast. It's another thing to write it and put it on paper. Is. So I'm always so admire people that, because your story. You're like, I went through it and I'm out the other side, or we're really never out the other side. We're still here on this planet. So there's much work to be done. But I think so much of what you've talked about on this episode, especially for people that are like, have a story and they're like, well, if I come out, like say you are gay and you're listening to this and you're, most of my listeners are a little bit older, but you are in your 20s or teens and you're afraid to talk to a parent. I just love the idea of the letter. That's such a beautiful idea to me. And then just also to understand, especially in these times, that nobody chooses to be gay. It's part of who you are, just like being straight is part of who you are. Or if you're trans and people are so judged for being different, and like, you're just trying to be a person and you're just trying to get through life, just like we all are. So honestly, like, butt the F out. It's not your life that you have the ability, Karen, to judge somebody because they're just trying to live their life and they want to be married like you do. And they want to have a family like you do. It just shouldn't even matter. It should not even matter. Anyways, Meagan, I adore you. I love talking to you today. Where can my audience find you?
I'm on all the social things except I'm on TikTok, but I really haven't gotten into it yet. I just can't get there. And so my website's meaganonan.com with the correct spelling.
Whatever. Meagan, let me just tell you a little secret. TikTok is the biggest nightmare. I'm like, am I like 75 years old? I don't understand it. My 12-year-old is like on it 24 hours a day, like mouthing weird words to like videos. I don't even know what she's doing. I have a TikTok. It's horrendously bad. But I just felt like everyone's like, well, if you're a podcaster or a speaker, you need to have a TikTok. And I'm like, I am like the grandma on TikTok that's like posting stuff that, like, if I tried to do like one of those videos with my daughter, my voice is like 5 minutes ahead of the actual where it's supposed to be. It's really embarrassing. So I'm right there with you. In closing, I loved having you on. Please follow Meagan. I'm going to post where you can find her on my show notes of my episodes. And you all, like, be kind. That's all I can say. Our world is going through so much right now, and there's so much turmoil and unhappiness and unrest. And really, everybody's just trying to live their life and like get through like these hard times. And if we just were a little bit kinder and just like said thank you at Starbucks when Meagan Judge holds the door open for you, then maybe we would have a much happier world. And that was not really what I was trying to go for with that, but just like be kind, let people be, and just live your freaking own life and like let it go. In closing, thank you, Meagan. You're awesome, even though you spell your name wrong. And everyone, be happy by making other people happy.
Judging Meagan with Meagan Judge.